Your favorite director's favorite director, the master of corruption, the foreign director who changed Hollywood forever, the featherweight champion of the film industry.
Where'd you get the midget?
A man who went through hell multiple times, but kept fighting for his art. What should have been one of the most inspiring tales in all of cinema, but whose dark truth nefariously linked to his films came out to light and shattered that illusion. We're talking, of course, about Roman Polanski. Join me as we delve into his filmmaking career, from his beginnings in war-torn Europe, his ascension through Hollywood, his peak, his literal exile, and his modern-day work. Talk about starting things off with a downer. Little Polanski is born in Paris the 18th of August 1933 to a Polish Jewish family. Shortly after, they moved to Krakow, right before Germany invaded and began World War II. At this time, when he was around 6, he managed to sneak into the theaters, which at the time were for non-Jewish only. What he would see was mostly German propaganda, but it didn't matter. He was in awe of the projector and the moving pictures. There were also some non-propaganda pieces he managed to see, such as Snow White, which terrified but also fascinated the young boy. It was something which transported him into another world. Unfortunately, very soon after, Roman and his family were forced into the Krakow ghetto. During this time, he would see great suffering, death, hunger, had friends, and even his mother, father, and sister sent to concentration camps. His father and sister would survive, but unfortunately his mother would die in Auschwitz. Through his father's efforts, he was snuck out of the ghetto before being sent to the camps. He managed to survive by hiding with different Catholic families in the countryside. By the time the war ended, Roman was 11 years old. Half of his life he had spent living through the war. Polanski attempted to return to a sense of a normal life, reuniting with his father. He realized his fascination with the motion pictures had stuck with him throughout the years, and he found in storytelling a way to escape from his tormented past. Roman would begin his acting career as early as 14 as the lead in the theater production of The Son of the Regiment. He would find himself in more plays and got roles as supporting characters in short and feature films, including Polanski drinking coffee, Polanski listening to the radio, Polanski jumping in a field, Polanski getting his legs blown up, Polanski beating up homeless people, and my personal favorite, Polanski doing a little dance. But despite this, he would not be accepted into any of the acting schools, as his father was the owner of a small company, something which was condemned under communist rule. So Roman was seen as a class enemy figure. Supposedly, he would even be rejected from the musical acting school. Despite all these rejections, Roman kept pushing, but it was actually his time working with Andrzej Wajda in A Generation 1955. He may have only been an uncredited supporting character, but being in the set's atmosphere, he felt inspired by Wajda, and that's when he knew he wanted to be a director. Finally, he landed in the Polish National Film School in Lodz, which emphasized realism and censored creativity, but Polanski would instead present surrealism and absurdity. He would direct many shorts, like Two Men in a Wardrobe, which would gain him notoriety in the European film world. After film school, 28-year-old Polanski would try to make his feature directorial debut with the script of Knife in the Water, a love triangle story focusing on individuality, without a direct political statement, something the Polish state did not appreciate. But after some changes, mostly downplaying the sexual tension, the script was finally approved, and with around $30,000, we finally got Knife in the Water, 1962, Roman's first feature film co-written and directed by him. We follow a well-off middle-aged couple as they sail in their yacht and invite a young hitchhiker to tag along with them. The whole film is a fight of the mind and body between a naive, reckless, wise-ass middle-aged man against a reflection of his own naive, reckless, wise-ass younger self. A female in between them, standing as the prize to the victor. It's the exploration of the male mind when put against each other for a woman. It's low budget, takes place in basically one setting, and only has 3 characters on screen, 2 of the actors making their acting debut. Would you believe me if I told you that there were production issues? Shooting in a small sailboat while out in the lake with a whole production group, actors, equipment, it's not exactly an easy thing. At one point, one of the cameras escaped cinematographer Jerry Lipman's hand and ended up at the bottom of the lake. It was never found. For being Polanski's first feature, it introduces a lot of staples, such as isolation and the corruption of innocence, but most importantly, his fascination with water. Polanski, like a lot of directors, also likes his cameos. Believe me, after watching all these films, he now feels like a rapey Stanley. And no, I didn't lie when I said there's only 3 actors on screen. But you see the young guy here? No, that's not Roman Polanski. However, if you listen to him,
Nie wygasił pan świateł.
that is Roman Polanski. The thing is, he didn't like the actor's voice and just said fuck it and decided to dub himself in. This was a great directorial debut. It looks beautiful, it has very clear themes you can follow, but most importantly, it doesn't lose your intrigue. You know the nature of the characters and you know things are bound to blow up. You're just going scene by scene as the tension ramps up and you're just there expecting it to finally blow up. There's very few awkward moments and nothing that really breaks your immersion. But how would it fare with the public and the critic? Well, initially, it seemed a disaster. The film was not exactly what the Polish state wanted, and upon first viewing it, the Prime Minister himself threw an ashtray at it. It was cold, lacking in social value, and bourgeois, middle-class slop. Ouch. Holding values of the West and not sticking with the communist mentality. But it was still sent to the Venice Film Festival, where hopefully it would have better luck, but more about that later. For now, what you have to know is that the communist censorship and interference with art, coupled with his rough divorce, was too much for him to handle, and so Roman went over to his country of origin, France. There he would find the French New Wave, rejection, and most importantly, his friend and future collaborator, Gerard Braque. Braque, a writer with strong work ethic but no real film knowledge. He seemed to be the exact opposite of Polanski, quiet and even paranoid of open spaces. But coincidentally, he was also getting out of a rough breakup, something that ended up making them bond. Roman and Braque would go on to co-write many of his future projects. Future, because for the time being, they achieved fuck all. Roman and Braque would shop their projects around to no luck, particularly a comedy thriller he and Braque wrote based on their personal lives, Cul-De-Sac. Claustrophobic 3-way drama much like Knife in the Water. Characters in the film would be inspired by Roman and Braque's surroundings, from a big and intimidating gangster based on Roman's friend who was renting him his room, to a short retired middle-aged man based on a French producer who asked Roman to write a story for him. And most importantly, the retired man's wife, a representation of their shared resentment towards their failed relationships of the past. But nobody wanted it. It was too artistic and too risky, with little to no return possible. But all of a sudden things started to change. People started coming up to Roman, recognizing him. Well, recognizing his work at least. Seemingly everyone but him knew that Knife in the Water was getting critical acclaim. Remember I told you the film was sent to the Venice Film Festival? Well, it actually won the Fipressi Award. Not only that, it was also nominated for Best Foreign Language Film at the Academy Awards. And not only that, it was even in the cover of Times magazine. Roman was on the map, even if he didn't know it yet. Through this success, he was invited to the Munich Film Festival, where he would meet Polish-American producer Gene Gutowski. Gutowski and Polanski would go on to collaborate in many projects, and as soon as they met, he was the one who pushed Roman into going to England and giving up on the whole making French films dream. It wasn't gonna happen. Following his friend's advice, he made the move to England, not speaking much, if any, English at all. Of course, still shopping Cul-De-Sac around. He went around London to all the American distributors, Paramount, United Artists, Columbia. They already knew him from his success in Knife in the Water, but no one wanted the project. He finally found someone who showed interest in producing the project, Compton Productions. Not what you're thinking. Compton Productions, who are mostly known for their exploitation films and soft corn flicks, owning adult theaters throughout London's red light district. Compton Productions saw in Roman someone who would bring the company some finesse, but most importantly, would work for cheap.
This business requires a certain amount of finesse.
But they wanted Roman to start off with something more commercially viable. After all, Compton had never financed a real feature film and wanted to get some return on the investment. However, this arrangement would leave the doors open for Cul-De-Sac, depending on how the project went. So Roman and Braque quickly drafted an outline for their next project, Repulsion, a psychological horror thriller. Repulsion, 1965, directed by Roman and co-written with Braque. Carol and her sister are immigrants living in London. From the very start, Carol isn't exactly well in the head. You could say she has some repulsion. Things kick off when Carol's sister and her boyfriend set off on a trip, leaving the disturbed Carol alone. Her psychological state deteriorates as cracks start to literally form around her. The film takes you through Carol's current torments in order for you to decipher what her past trauma is. Everything in this movie is grander compared to Knife in the Water. The cast, first of all, there's extras, but most importantly, the hidden ace up Polanski's sleeve. Legendary British cinematographer Gilbert Taylor, who Polanski had to beg and plead to come to in order to get. Taylor was fresh from working on Kubrick's Dr. Strangelove. He would later even go on to work with Hitchcock on Frenzy, would work on one of my favorite horror movies, The Omen, and oh yeah, he'd be the cinematographer in Star Wars. You can tell there was an actual bigger budget. You go from the eerily desolate ocean in Knife in the Water to the lively streets of London. The imagery is quite impressive, and it really sells Carol's mental state. But where the movie really shines is in the story it presents you, which really isn't there. The fun is in the details, and it's where Polanski shows his talent for building this world around its characters, which really transforms the story into a more memorable experience. Why does Carol have repulsion? There's a whole separate puzzle you have to put together yourself in order for the movie to work. Again, we see the corruption of innocence, and I gotta say, the scenes of sexual torment are the highlights in this movie. They truly are straight out of a nightmare. They give you a very disturbing sense of helplessness. It isn't like other exploitation films of the time. It is actually horrifying and extremely well done, which is only more horrifying when you consider the director. Repulsion had a final budget of around $100,000. Box office records on the film vary a lot, but it did enough to leave Compton producers happy. Critically, it was another huge success for the director. Once again, it won the Fipressi Award at the Berlin International Film Festival, as well as Best Cinematography at the BAFTA Awards. Polanski had definitely managed to enter into the English-speaking world. But what did Polanski think about Repulsion? Well, Polanski would go on to call Repulsion the shoddiest, technically well below the standard I try to achieve. Prostitution. A film made just for money. A bit harsh. He thought of Repulsion as merely a stepping stone for making his real passion project, Cul-De-Sac. Due to Polanski's discontent with Repulsion, he wanted his next movie to go back to his art house roots, to be something that he would watch instead of making it for a more general audience. And so with Compton Productions keeping their word, we finally got Cul-De-Sac, or now Cul-De-Sac. Cul-De-Sac, 1966, or Bottom of the Bag, or Dead End. A tale of a young, retired couple living in an isolated castle who get a surprise visit from a gangster and are held hostage in their own home. Once again co-written with Brach and with cinematography by Gilbert Taylor. The dark comedy shows Polanski's views on relationships and his disdain for the middle-class mentality.
They should have had the courtesy to have telephoned in advance.
The plot is very simple, very similar to Knife in the Water. You have a trio of characters and basically one single location. But here is where Polanski manages to show his directorial prowess. His artistic vision really shines through and takes an otherwise dull story and transforms it into an hour and 50-minute black comedy session on middle-class hypocrisy. It's two men, each holding a contradicting philosophy behind them, trying to compete, outsmart one another, while at the same time coexisting, and a woman in between them. But a big difference from Knife in the Water is the cast. Made up of British stage play extraordinaire Donald Pleasance, blacklisted American actor Lionel Stander, and now changing Catherine for her older sister Françoise Dorléac. Also with the support of Irish stage actor Jack McGowan. This may have been Polanski's dream project, but production was more of a nightmare. It was a rough time of dealing with uncooperative actors as well as a struggling studio.
5 shrimps.
Such a simple film revolving around a trio of characters and a single location had seemingly gone out of control, with actors being mean and even violent with each other, Donald Pleasance thinking he was above his co-stars, Françoise Dorléac's diva behavior which put the production on hold as she decided to fly back to France for a filling, distrusting of British dentists. I'm not blaming her on that. And who overall had a hard time working with Roman, who found her less exciting than her sister. Lionel Stander being difficult on set and doing the least amount of work possible in order to cash in on overtime bonuses.
It's getting late. Betty, by time. We all gotta get up early tomorrow morning.
This wouldn't get solved until Brach started a rumor that Polanski was considering casting Stander in his next movie. The ruse worked and magically Stander became a completely manageable actor. The only bright spot for Polanski was surprisingly Jack McGowan, in whom he found an equally excited artist who was perfectly capable of following every direction action thrown his way. Roman liked McGowan's attitude so much, he started envisioning a role for him on his next movie. But we'll talk about that later. With all the production problems and Roman being a perfectionist, the film was now weeks behind schedule and way over budget. Compton producers would start showing up on set and wrapping things up for the day before Roman had the chance to finish up filming. But out of necessity comes greatness. Having basically run out of time, and with the longest scene on the script still needing to be shot, the beach scene, where Pleasant's character breaks down to Stander while Dorliac runs off naked to the beach, then comes back at the end of the scene, all the while a plane flies over the characters perfectly in sync. Originally intended to take 5 to 6 days of shooting, days Polanski simply didn't have. Instead, he decided to do it as a one-shot. Gilbert Taylor himself said it couldn't be done. What resulted is one of cinema's most famous scenes ever. A 7-minute one-shot with fantastic acting between Pleasance and Stander, a perfectly choreographed plane flying over them, and Dorliac fainting because she was naked in ice-cold water. Yes, while shooting this, Françoise Dorliac fainted, her pulse basically stopping from the overexposure. The whole set went into a frenzy and everyone turned against Polanski, who was downplaying the whole thing, believing Dorliac to be faking it in order to get out of reshooting the scene. For her part, Dorliac would later go on to say, Polanski is completely preoccupied with film. He doesn't think about the actors as human beings at all. But I do not mind it, he is a brilliant director. Anyways, how was Cul-De-Sac's reception? While it is nowadays one of Polanski's most celebrated movies in film class, at the time, it did not perform so well. It was a box office bomb, and to say reviews were mixed would be putting things lightly. The same critics who praised Knife in the Water and Repulsion were tearing this movie apart, particularly in England and America. The film may have been out of its time. Viewers were not used to black comedies such as this one. It was, however, received better in countries like Germany, where Cul-De-Sac won the Golden Bear at the 16th Berlin Film Festival. Pretty ironic for Germany to be the one seeing the humor in something. But most importantly, what did Roman think about it? Roman would go on to say, "It is my best film. I always loved it. I always believed in it. It is real cinema done for cinema, like art for art." It's pretty interesting to see the difference between Cul-De-Sac and Repulsion. One loved by its creator, one hated by it, but one loved by audiences and critics, and one not so much. Anyways, if it's a film made by Roman, for Roman, and Roman liked it, then I guess it's a success. However, those who really did not like this movie were Compton Productions, who saw absolutely no profits whatsoever and instantly decided to cut ties with Polanski. After Cul-De-Sac, Polanski decided to do a complete 180 and make his next movie something more appealing to all types of moviegoers, and maybe even something that could make some money. Although Cul-De-Sac was far from a financial success, Repulsion was still in the mind of producers whenever they thought of Polanski. Pretty ironic considering how much Polanski hated it. So when he pitched a slapstick horror comedy, Filmways Inc., a mid-sized independent film company, saw a commercially viable film and were eager to work with Polanski. Even MGM jumped in for distribution. Enter Dance of the Vampires, or The Fearless Vampire Killers, 1967. It saw a professor, played by McGowan, and his assistant, played by Polanski himself, going around Transylvania searching for vampires. A parody of popular horror movies at the time, particularly the Hammer horror movies, which dominated horror cinema just years earlier, with such films as Dracula in 1958 and The Curse of Frankenstein in 1957. Far removed and with a way higher budget than his previous films. Dance of the Vampires proved that Polanski was able to make movies for the masses, and he approached it with the same level of attention and dedication of his more art house movies. The horror aspects of this film are actually well done, but perhaps what the film does best is its atmosphere. Particularly for the time, it's pretty impressive how you buy that, yeah, this is Transylvania and we are on a vampire's castle. It follows vampire logic, which is surprising how much it has remained the same. It's basically the same lore as what we do in the shadows. I appreciate how he doesn't waste time to explain we need garlic because no, you already fucking know why you need garlic. Comedy is subjective and especially hard to translate for over time, but you know, there's some good stuff.
Anybody know a castle?
There's a castle.
You see, the castle and the windmill.
I also think Polanski fits perfectly in the role of the professor's assistant. Oh, and I guess Sharon Tate was also in it. She plays the love interest of Polanski. But why am I switching between Dance of the Vampires and The Fearless Vampire Killers? Well, this was the first time Polanski would have to deal with the American studios. MGM saw the film and said, hey, we like you, we like it, this is something that can make us some money, we'll take this film and distribute it across America. But they did do a lot of changes without telling it, changing the title altogether. They would also dub in line for some of the stronger British accents, which is something quite common, honestly. They would also make a whole animation and add it at the beginning of the movie, just explaining the lore of vampires, garlic, crosses, everything I just praised before for not including in the movie. Polanski resented them so much he wanted his name to be cut out of the film.
Revolting.
But we can say Polanski got the last laugh, as the film performed way better in Europe than it did in America, so Polanski stays winning, I guess. Polanski's version is also the most accessible today, although it's now titled The Fearless Vampire Killers, which I have to be honest, there's nothing wrong with Dance of the Vampires, but Fearless Vampire Killers, fucking great name. Anyways, the same year The Fearless Vampire Killers came out, Sharon and Polanski were already engaged. And in 1968, they got married, instantly becoming one of cinema's power couples of the time. And before Roman even knew it, we were now entering the peak of Polanski. Don't fucking click off the video yet, we finally got to a movie you've actually watched. I hope so. In 1967, Ira Levi's novel of a mother trying to protect her unborn baby from the grasps of evil hit the shelves and became an instant cult classic. It became the best-selling horror novel of the 60s, and best believe everyone in Hollywood wanted a piece of it. But it was actually legendary B-movie producer and director William Castle, who after getting a second mortgage on his house, snatched the movie rights before the book had even been published. Castle saw an opportunity to move away from B-movies and make something greater. He reached out to Paramount producer Robert Evans. Evans saw the great potential it had, but was not convinced Castle could direct it. In the words of Evans, it was too good for Bill Castle. Meanwhile, Polanski was actually set to direct a skiing thriller which would go on to be Downhill Racer, starring Robert Redford. Evans and Polanski met to discuss Downhill Racer, when all of a sudden Evans gave Polanski a copy of Rosemary's Baby and asked him to read it. It is said that Polanski stayed up all night reading the novel, and the next day Polanski had completely scrapped away Downhill Racer and was already set on adapting Rosemary's Baby. Rosemary's Baby, 1968. It's a compellingly strange tale of a young married couple, Guy, played by John Cassavetes, and Rosemary, played by Mia Farrow, going through a tough, life-changing pregnancy while uncovering their neighbors' secrets and deeper, more nefarious conspiracies. It's a movie with a surprising amount of charm, starting more like a morning soap opera and ending like a daytime nightmare.
This is no dream, this is really happening!
This would be Polanski's first time adapting someone else's work, and his first time working in America. Just as the movie, things on set were rather strange. He had to deal with Mia Farrow, an actress who he himself never chose, but would impress Polanski during production, and the two of them would bond, seeing how committed Farrow was to the role, going as far as getting a divorce from Frank Sinatra, who did not approve of her acting in the movie. And on the opposite side was John Cassavetes. Cassavetes and Roman started things off with a nice honeymoon. Both got along with each other, they both were into the same things, but Cassavetes, being a director himself, did not see eye to eye with Polanski's method, and tensions would just ramp up during shooting. It seemed that Roman was fearing every day to be his last on set, as the heads of Paramount would just keep pushing him to deliver faster and faster. Would he be able to live up to expectations, or would he be sent back to Poland? On a budget of $3.2 million, Rosemary's Baby made $33 million. It was the first film of Polanski to be universally loved. Critics, the general audiences, the studio, Polanski himself, everyone loved the film. It took horror into a new era. No Rosemary's Baby means no Omen, no Exorcist, no Exorcist 2024. It showed horror movies could be serious and audiences wanted it. The ambience, the subversion of gender roles, the male manipulation, gaslighting, paranoia, isolation in the big city, distrust in your partner, conspiracy rabbit holes, political and religious commentary, all done to perfection. What a great fucking movie. If you're a fan of 70s horror movies, you have to watch this movie, and if you're not a fan, you still need to watch this movie. Somehow, it did not win shit at the Oscars. Mia Farrow not even nominated for Best Actress is a disgrace. But the charm of the nosy neighbor played by Ruth Gordon did not go unnoticed. Her surprising win for Best Supporting Actress became the first Oscar to come from a Polanski film. The film has aged rather strangely. It may not be the 60s, but the themes the movie discusses seem to be as relevant as ever. Of course, the director being oblivious to his own movie's message has soured it in the eyes of many. But I'm not going into that now. That's for later. It catapulted the career of Robert Evans, turned Mia Farrow into a movie star, and made absolutely everyone want a piece of Roman Polanski. It is now August 1969, It's been about a year since Rosemary's Baby came out. Roman and Sharon are Hollywood's power couple. At this point, Sharon was pregnant, and Roman was away working on the script for Day of the Dolphin to star Sharon and Jack Nicholson. Day of the Dolphin was a movie where marine biologists coach dolphins to speak English, and not only that, they wanted them to detonate bombs under the president's yacht. Anyways, Sharon was in LA as she was 8 months pregnant and wanted the baby to be born an American, and Polanski, who was supposed to be back in America, was in England still working on the script for Day of the Dolphin. Unfortunately, on August 9, 1969, Roman received devastating news. Sharon Tate, Jay Sebring, Abigail Folger, Wojciech Frykowski, and Stephen Parent were found murdered in Sharon and Polanski's home. It was a big turning point in Hollywood, the end of the 60s hippie era, a devastating blow for Polanski, as well as a turning point of him in the eyes of the media. Polanski went from being this up-and-coming European filmmaker, Holocaust survivor, to now being portrayed as having had a part in the murders.
Right, unbearable for me, horrible things about my wife.
Months later, it would come out that it was actually the Manson family. Till this day, we still don't know the motives. But this did not stop the media from going after Polanski, who, up until this point, did not warrant it. He hadn't become a villain yet. Macbeth, 1971. After his hiatus, Polanski and his friend, British stage critic Kenneth Tynan, got to work on an adaptation of Shakespeare's Macbeth. The story of an overly ambitious soldier trying to fulfill prophecies and losing his sanity would be in verse, sticking with the play.
All hail, Macbeth, that shall be king hereafter.
But this time raw, with a younger cast, a bigger focus on historical accuracy, and perhaps due to the murders, gruesome, some calling it an expression of his emotion. But at the time, big studios were not keen on adapting Shakespeare. Finding funding a grueling task, Polanski turned back to an old trick, going to the Corn Studios. But this time, it wouldn't be small-scale Compton productions. Remember, Polanski had just made Rosemary's Baby. No, he went to Playboy instead. Yes, Hugh Hefner produced a William Shakespeare adaptation. Casting was also controversial. Polanski wanted young and beautiful actors to portray these overly ambitious characters, who so often were played by old heads. So he went for relatively unknown at the time John Finch as Macbeth and Francesca Annis as Lady Macbeth. John Finch in particular was controversial, as it was said that he met Polanski during a flight and had convinced the director with his charm rather than his talent. The film had a budget of around $2 million, but thanks to the good old British weather and the meticulous Polanski, the budget went over $3 million, with Polanski having to give a third of his salary and Hugh Hefner giving $500,000 out of his own pocket. But while everyone's favorite creepy director and everyone's favorite creepy billionaire were trying to do right by Shakespeare, the MPAA were not a fan. Unfortunately, the Motion Pictures Association of America gave the film an X rating, meaning no one under 18, even if accompanied by an adult, could watch the film. This was a huge blow and killed the movie on arrival.
Long live the king!
It made less than $1 million and hurt Playboy's movie venture. It was a film too Shakespearean for common audiences and too Playboy for Shakespeare fans. It is perhaps too painfully accurate to the play. While it does a great job depicting Macbeth's tragic downfall, watching this with a friend who had no knowledge of the play or the book, fuck all idea what was going on. Even though some things didn't age that well, it is most of the time beautifully immersive. Of course, this was the return of Gil Taylor. The outsides are some of the best looking shots in all of Polanski's filmography. I mean, look at these shots. It looks so beautifully raw. Maybe it was worth it battling the Scottish great outdoors. It even has some horror sequences which are pretty reminiscent of that of Repulsion. This might be a wild comparison, but you take Barry Lyndon and the Star Wars prequels and you get this movie. So if you're a nerd who likes Shakespeare, it's worth a watch. You fucking virgin. What? 1972. Polanski's vacation movie. After the heavy themes and all the production problems of Macbeth, Polanski needed a break. Shot almost entirely in a beautiful seaside Italian villa, where Polanski and Brach were writing it and developing the film as they went along. American tourist Nancy, played by Sidney Rome, escapes, well, a tough situation, leading her to wander into a mysterious villa, full of bizarre characters, strange situations, and possible time manipulation. It's Alice in Wonderland, but instead of purple cats and talking rabbits, it's retired pimps, sex addicts, disturbed doctors, Americans, ladies wearing hats, and mosquito. It is said that while making this movie, Polanski was thinking to himself, this is my magnum opus. What asks the question? What is a movie? Is it a coherent story? Is it an exploration of themes? Commentary? Is it a message? Well, you won't find any of that in What. I hate when people ask what was the point of the movie. That being said, what was the point of the movie? It's easily Polanski's most obscure and forgotten film. It had a very limited demographic and a very limited screening too. It is said that it only made $65 opening weekend in the US. It's a movie where if you don't ask questions, you'll be confused, and if you ask questions, you'll be more confused.
I like that.
It's a 70s movie which existence can only be justified with, hopefully they were doing a lot of blow. If anything, this movie shows that you can't just rely on talent, and there is a lot of work that goes into making a decent film. Much like in the movie, what was supposed to be a relaxing retreat took a dark turn behind the scenes. Unbeknownst at the time, what may be Polanski's first case of sexual assault allegedly took place during filming What, with Renate Langer, a German actor-model who's an uncredited extra in the film. Langer was 15 at the time. It wouldn't be until decades later in 2017 that the accusation would be made, far past the statute of limitations, and so no official investigation was conducted.
If he suggests a ride in the pedal boat, refuse. Refuse absolutely, scream if necessary.
And on that depressing bombshell, we end part 1. I know this is a sensitive topic and I really don't aim to downplay Polanski's actions or idolize him. That's Hollywood's job. I just aim to show how big and influential he once was and why even after all he's done, he's still talked about today. Anyways, see you on the next video where hopefully there will be some better movies.